Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of What's Happening. I'm George Binns, and I'm here with my co-host, Elliot Margolis, and our guest this evening is the president of the City Council of Beverly, Paul Guanci. Welcome, Paul.
Well, thank you. Always great to be here in the BevCam studios.
And I guess we want to talk about the state of the city. So if you were a real estate agent talking to some guy who wanted to move a factory here or a business here, what would you say were the top three things that he should consider that makes Beverly special?
Well, I think that we still have industrial areas to expand. We have Cherry Hill, we have up at the Music Theater, and things like that. But also that we've worked out tax increment financing deals to bring major companies here to the city of Beverly. And while the real estate tax that we give is very small, they're able to get bigger benefits from the state. In the past 4 years, we've had 4 big companies come to Beverly. High-Res Biosolutions, Krona, they're up at Cherry Hill. They relocated. Krona came from Peabody. High-Res Bio came from Woburn, and they were renting from Cummings property there. They were looking for their own spot because Cummings went up on the rent. They wanted to be in control of their destiny. And then we had Harmonic Drive, which just opened up by the Music Theater on Dunham Road. They purchased a piece of property from Cummings and built their own factory. They came over from Peabody, and they're a worldwide company. They've had some of their things go on the space shuttle.
Yeah.
And then now we're working with another one, Freudenberg Medical. They're up in Gloucester at Blackbird Circle, the industrial park up there, and they're working to build on Sanfonso Drive.
Yeah. Harmonic Drive is interesting because it started in the shoe.
Right. It's like almost come full circle.
Yeah, yeah. And if it was talking to somebody who's going to buy a house, what would they be considering?
Well, real estate market is good here in Beverly. The schools are still good. I think we really have to be careful to see how many students the city can actually handle. We have a middle school that was built for 1,300. And this year, there's 1,498 students at the middle school. It's a little overcrowded. I get a lot of that information from my wife because she's president of the PTO in the middle school. And the teachers and the staff are stressed there. The schools are still good. The elementary schools are good. The high school is really good. I think the middle school is a bit of a transition for kids, and that can be difficult. But you know, what do you say? The real estate market is good. I mean, you pay $500,000 for a 2-bedroom cape that needs a lot of work. So people do want to move here to Beverly.
Yeah. But see, what you bring up here is interesting about the lack of planning. For instance, when this high school was built, it was built for about 1,300 students. But that was before we developed Rantoul Street and have a lot more residents in the city. And now you're talking the middle school, which was just built, is already overcrowded. Why is the planning in Beverly so poor?
I think that we need to...
It's not the planning in Beverly. It's the state that does it to us.
Right.
They set the size of your school. This is as big as it's going to be. And you can go and tell them, they're blue in the face, that, hey, we can see this bump coming, and no interest at all.
No, I think we really need to, I know that we just went through this huge planning process, Plan Beverly, and the recommendations, what I think is they're very, very aggressive. I think that we need to step back and take a look at, really, what do we want here in Beverly? I think that we're growing too fast. I mean, the development is great on Rantoul Street. Focusing on that transit-oriented development, but who's
easy
to
for you
say,
to say,
right?
yeah.
But who's to say that those people that are living there aren't going to have children?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are betting that those are always going to be single professionals that live there. I think that that's how the Millery started out and the Gateway, and there's plenty of children that live in there and go to our Beverly Public Schools.
Well, the whole idea is you live in an apartment for a while, and when you start to get your act together and you pay off your college loans, then you start thinking about buying a house. And where better to buy a house than where you've already set down some roots?
Sure, but the housing stock is low here in Beverly.
Right, and the problem, from what I see as someone who's studied, say, tax classification, you find we lose money on single-family homes. The city loses money. You have a single-family home with 2 kids, you're paying $12,000, $13,000 a year for a kid. They're not paying $26,000 in taxes. So instead of building more housing, or why don't we build more commercial property, which the city makes money on?
Right. But only so much. I mean, there's only so many places that are zoned commercial and industrial. You would hate to see, and the city hasn't taken commercial property or industrial property and rezoned it to residential yet.
Yeah. Well, I guess the next big question is what happens with Folly Hill? That's the last, as I understand, the last big piece of property that it's attractive. It's on 128. It could go either way.
Yeah, I mean, that would be great. I mean, the owners want to sell the property to a developer. Most fitting, it would be great for industrial and commercial, but right now it's residential. And they came before the planning department and threw out a number of 700 units, housing units, 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, that would all add children to our school department.
Yeah.
That would make our schools obsolete right away.
You'd have to start over again. Something like that. And nobody's talked about that lately because it's tied up in court, but that's something you have to think about on the horizon. Eventually something's going to go there. If there's a way that the city can work with the property owners, but you've got to remember, what are you going to do with the people that live there now? To do something commercial there, it would be more fitting. Less traffic, and we're talking about, the developers were already talking about trying to cut through neighborhoods in Ryle Side to access that property, which the neighborhood, it would change the whole face of if you're going down Elliott Street, the whole right side of Elliott Street.
Well, get back to the point you started to make. What is the character of Beverly? Because everybody talks about, well, we want to keep the character the same. And we got into this tremendous free-for-all over Depot 2, trying to preserve the old railroad hotels, which I can get into a long discussion over that one. But what does really, in your mind anyway, or from what you talk with the various people on, what do you think people think the character of Beverly is?
Well, they think it's changing a little. And, I've always said that, we're not Hamilton and Wenham, but we're not Salem and Lynn. And I think all this development, it makes people think that we're turning into a more urban center like Lynn and Salem. And, I mean, the way that things have gone in those two cities, the school systems have gone downhill, and I think they're to the point where they're almost unrepairable. Imagine taking the job as superintendent of Salem schools and then the school committee saying, okay, you're here, fix it. And it's almost an unfixable problem. We're at a real critical juncture in the city. We want to remain, we were 40,000 people for so long. Now we're creeping up to that 44,000 number. Do we want to be 50,000 people here in the city? Current residents would say no. There's two schools of thought. There's really young people that are really pushing this development, and then there's the people that have lived here their entire lives that say, hey, whoa, it's too much for us, and we don't want to leave our city.
There's a lot of people who believe that any kind of change is bad change, and then there's some people, me for instance, who believes in certain kind of change to make things better. But we have to be aware of the results of the change, the consequences of our actions. And, okay, so we just built the new middle school, but the consequences of those actions are it's already not big enough.
Right.
And whether it's the city or the state, it's the politicians that are not doing their job.
So we really have to be careful. I think the school committee really needs to look at their school choice numbers and whether or not Beverly can still afford to partake in the school choice program. Because once you take somebody in kindergarten, you own them until they're seniors. I don't think that we have room for it. And the number that we get for taking in a student isn't enough to educate that student. In Beverly, I think we spend almost $14,500 or almost $15,000 per student. Maybe school choice, we only get 9 or 10. So it's a net loss. While you are getting some money, it's a net loss. And now you have additional students that kind of take away from that educational program you're trying to provide your students that already live here. And now the school department this year is looking for, they're going to present a budget to the city council that's an increase of 5.8%. You know, I've sat with our city council budget analyst, and he's said for years that the school budget is unsustainable growing at this rate. He said the school, our new growth overall will be 4%, and that's what the school committee budget should be. They get most of the new money every year.
Well, how much of the city budget goes to the...
You know what? If you figure in all the debt for the high school, the middle school, the elementary schools that are left, school choice, and other things that that gets picked up on the city side, it's almost 60%. And this is the first time, you know, and I've been around, some people say too long, but this is this past year was the first time that I actually heard other people that work in other departments say, hey, listen, how come the school gets all this money while we end up cutting the police department, cutting the fire department, cutting public works, we're not paving enough streets? We got to figure it out.
Yeah, well, there's a balance you have to get into.
Right.
And I think one of the things that, from my perspective, and you look at the budget, and it's a whole bunch of numbers, and you guys, I do a marvelous job of putting up with that analysis. But from a citizen's point of view, I would like to know what the assets of the city are. How many things do we own, like Lynch Park and the schools and all the rest of the municipal buildings and facilities, as well as one of my bugaboos is how many pieces of equipment does the city own? Every time I turn around, it looks like it's a different colored truck with a Beverly logo on it. And I think when Tim Flaherty was president of the board, he pushed through an ordinance about at least give us a listing of everything we own. And I don't know that that's ever been implemented.
That number is, every year we have Powers and Sullivan. They're the city's auditors that they come in, and they're going to do a presentation before the city council on April 21st. And that number is in that report. Actually, I don't know if it's broken down, but that number of all the city's assets is in that report for accounting purposes.
Mm-hmm. Does that get published online?
It is online, and copies are available in the city clerk's office.
That's good. I like to look at that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a big number.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure it is.
It's a big city.
Right.
Yeah.
But getting back to the schools for a second, I know that the city council cannot change the school budget.
Right.
But you can reject it. And you can reject it and say, this is how much you have to cut. And you could even say, here's some of the reasons what we think you can cut, even though you can't change the budget yourself. Has that ever happened?
It may have happened in the early 2000s when we had, the economy went in the tank. And I remember myself, Don Martin, and Jack Murray, God rest his soul, one of my old good friends, sat there, and Tom Crean was the mayor, and we went through our budget to cut. We'd cut pencils, we cut pens, we cut all small line items, and we'd asked the school committee to do the same thing. I think that they did take their budget back then and rework the numbers, because at that time we couldn't afford it because our cuts in state aid, our cuts in school aids, we weren't getting the money we needed for roads and sidewalks. And if you remember correctly, we had the Quinn bill that the state used to pick up half of for the police's education. Mm-hmm. That went away altogether. And somehow Mayor Scanlon worked it out with either Chief Ray or Chief Terry before him to include that within the budget. It ended up becoming education incentive as opposed to that Quinn bill number. Mm. But it's, they're going to have to take a long, hard look at it.
And one of the other things that bothers me is unfunded state mandates.
Sure. Okay? That's Jack Murray all over again right there.
Yeah, I mean, Jack was a nice guy. I really like Jack. But why can't we go to the state and say, listen, if you're going to tell me I have to do this, you've got to give me money to do it. These unfunded state mandates are killing not only Beverly, but every city. No, but
every city in town.
Every city.
It takes away money that, we put money towards that, and it takes away from our schools, our roads, our sidewalks.
And the thing is, one question that I ask a lot of people is, what percentage of our income should go in taxes? Because right now, when you look at all the different taxes that we pay and all the different fees that we pay, people are paying about 55% of their income in taxes.
Anyway, that's conservative, I think.
That's conservative, but people always question me on it. So okay, I'm glad you.
No, I see that. And
so the question is, we've got a mayor that believes in taxing. I don't think he's ever seen a tax he doesn't like, and my taxes in my house keep going up every year. When does it end?
Right.
I mean, because you've got to make priorities as to what we're going to do and what's the responsibility of the people to do.
This year we may ask Brian Ailes to come up with a budget. Brian Ailes is the city's finance director, and I know Matt St. Hilaire, who was on the city council for 4 years, had asked at one point, what would a city budget look like if we didn't go up that maximum 2.5%, which we do every year. I know they don't do that in PVD because they have that really strong commercial growth, but it's definitely something to take a look at. Because like you say, there are, and especially this past year, I mean, our taxes are based on, market value and things like that, but the people that own 2, 3, and 4 families really got whacked this year.
Yeah. Well, you get into a different issue also of the mayor, when he did his State of the City address, he was talking about we need more housing. And my concern is that it's nice to solve Boston's problem with the TOD.
Right.
But at the same time, you run a small business. You got people that are working for you. Can they afford to live in the city? And where do they live? And I think getting into this issue of the Plan Beverly, it ought to be a goal that everybody that works in Beverly can afford to live here. And we need to have some sort of zoning accommodations so that you can come up with housing that people can afford,
right.
Not the magic 40B housing.
No, right, workforce housing. I have a gentleman who works full-time for me. He lives in Seabrook because it's affordable for him to work there. And then I have a lot of, at this time, I have, single people that live at home. I have one kid that works for me. He comes down from Salisbury because it's cheaper to live in Salisbury than it is here in Beverly. Yeah. That is a problem. And I know that Andrew DeFranza from Harbor Light Community Partners is always talking about that. He'll always say that, I want the guy that makes my sandwich or the guy that pours my beer when I go to A&B to be able to live here in the city. And unfortunately, we're to that point where it's very, very difficult. They had a report on TV the other day, I don't know whether it was on Fox or NECN, about the cost to live in a one-bedroom apartment in Boston. You have to make $32 and change an hour. And it was the highest of the other examples they showed.
So I think Beverly is starting to turn into a city like that. And I think you mentioned earlier that Peabody does very well on their tax increments because they have a very strong commercial operation. And getting back to the point of Folly Hill or what other these areas are, this is, I think, where the city needs to put more emphasis in it. And I think for a while the administration had a person working on grants and aids kind of thing, and that job got morphed into constituent
services. No, we still have the grant director, and her name is Catherine Barrett, and she's been around for about 3 or 4 years. When Mayor Cahill took office in 2014, that was a position that he instituted. It's funny that I know that you're very friendly with Tom Crean. That was one of the best ideas that he had, was coming up with a grant director to go out and look for that free money. And the woman that's doing it now came from the private sector with a history in it. And she's really, there's not a meeting that we have, the city council meets 2 Mondays a month, that there's not a grant that we have to accept on that.
That's good, yeah.
In many moons ago, going back to Peter Fortunato.
All right, before my time.
Okay, I didn't realize you were that young.
Good Italian mayor.
He was nice, really nice guy.
No, great guy.
But I said to him, why don't we take McDonald's down? It's Glover's Wharf. That's where the birthplace of the American Navy is. Build a replica of the ship Hannah. Bring some tourism into the city. and his response was, we need McDonald's. I talked to every mayor since. I said to Bill Scanlon one time, I says, Bill, Beverly is a city that people drive through to go from Salem to Gloucester.
Right.
We don't even advertise that we're the birthplace of the American Navy.
They take the sign down?
You know, I mean, promote it. Say, this is it. I mean, this is a major possibility to bring tourism in. Number one, bring tourism in, then maybe up at Folly Hill we could put a couple of hotels. And that brings in even more money because not only do you get the tax money, but you get extra, taxes on that.
Right.
But we're a city that doesn't promote it. We've got that McDonald's area that's been vacant for, 15 years?
Anyway, more.
What are we doing about that?
But we tried. Back in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was a group, Washington Naval Base, that really tried to build that ship with private funds, and I think a lot of the members of that group were older, and I know, bring up Jack Murray again, he was part of it, and there were a few other people from Beverly Farms, and it just ended up going away. They built the replica, the toy model, and that's as far as it went. But they did have, they had trouble raising funds. But it does talk a little bit about promoting our history in the new Plan Beverly draft recommendations.
Besides the Plan Beverly, there's a charter commission that's being created. Where is that going to go? What was the plan on that?
All right, so the Charter Commission has met twice already. When the new charter was voted in by the residents of Beverly, it was in the late 90s. The first year we reviewed it was 2000, before it was really fully implemented. So the chair of the committee was a gentleman by the name of Charlie Grimes. I'm sure you both know him. Oh, and we went through the document and really just worked on grammatical things. 10 years ago, they did it again. Councilor Jim Latta ran the committee, and they went through everything, and they decided not to make any recommendations. This year, I can't believe it's such a dry task, but I had almost 35 people, I think 33, get in touch with me to be on the Charter Commission, or Charter Committee. So, I mean, there are other things that we can really look at. I mean, things that I would be intrigued to see as opposed to a 2-year term for mayor, make it a 4-year term they do in Salem. I would think about a 3-year term for city council as opposed to a 2-year term. Maybe not 4, because what if you get somebody in there that really doesn't like the job? 4 years is a long time. But when you're an elected official for 2 years, you're, especially first-timers, you're just getting your feet wet, and then you have to run again for re-election. So those are a couple of things that this charter committee may look at. And if they make recommendations to change the charter in any way like that, we would have to have an election for a charter commission, and people would run for that before to make those big changes on this. Another thing, I think that maybe the mayor shouldn't be on the school committee. The school committee doesn't want the mayor there anyway. He's that one that always says no. Bill Scanlon used to say, I only go to the real important ones because they don't want me there anyway. Yeah. This year, Mayor Cahill is going to have a tough time with the school committee because, he's disagreed with certain members in the past, and I think that membership group has grown a little, and Mayor Cahill is going to need some support from the other members of the school committee, especially with that big number coming at us. What else could we look at? You may want to change the fact that whoever gets the most votes in the city is city council president.
Well, how about a bigger change going to a town manager type of system instead of having a mayor and a city council? I
mean, that's great. I mean, I would love a city manager who's based on experience, has his master's degree in public administration. That takes away the fact that anybody can be mayor, no matter.
There you go. I could be the city manager. Yeah. I've got the master's in public administration.
Yeah, but you would do that. But I mean, that's like what Tim Murray was. Tim Murray was. Worcester had a city manager. Yeah. Tim Murray was the president of the city council in Worcester. And lo and behold, he ended up being lieutenant governor.
See, a lot of those changes that you suggested I've been in favor of for years.
Right.
Because they make sense.
Right. That 4-year mayor thing is really important.
That's critical. And I remember
if you don't go the route of a city manager.
I remember talking to Charlie Grimes about that, and Charlie's answer was, well, we know 4 years is the right thing to do, but we didn't think we could get it passed. Well, that's not a good answer.
No.
Because if it's the right thing to do, you got to fight and do it. And it is, because like you say, the mayor, he gets in, he's working, the first 6 months he's working with somebody else's budget.
Right.
He does his first budget, and then after his first budget, which you still don't know what's going on with it, you got to run for re-election. Right. Not fair to the mayor.
No, it's a lot of work. Or if you like to campaign, it is fair to the mayor.
Yeah, it's also bad in terms of you always having to raise money.
Right.
And that you're always running, just like you say for the council.
What else would you like to see changes relative to, because the city council right now doesn't have a lot of influence on things. It's always secondhand. Something gets presented to you, and then you either like it or don't like it. It's awful hard, I think, for the city council to initiate something different. Like, if you mentioned the overcrowding in both the high school and the middle school, could the city council go tell the school committee, hey, start planning a new school?
I don't think we're to that point yet, but the city council can do things. I mean, if you look at things, I know that Mayor Cahill will always say, well, the mayor's office works with the city council, but whether you like them or not, I mean, there were a few things that rose out of individual councils' work that got passed in recent years. There was the plastic bag ordinance to eliminate plastic bags. That was started with us. There was the Human Rights Committee, which was started with us. A number of committees were started by Maureen Trubataris when she was on the council. It's things like that. I think the city council, and call me guilty for not really pushing the need to be a little more involved with the other city department heads. You know, it's our preview. We can call them in at any time to find out what's going on in the department. We need to do a little more of that this year, especially knowing that we have 4 new councilors on the board.
Well, the thing I get concerned about is this constituent services function all of a sudden being in the mayor's office. It sounds like a lot of what the city council would normally be doing.
It definitely allows us to do more. I mean, Kevin Hartunian, he became the chief of staff, and there were times that I felt like he worked for me, not only the mayor, because he was so responsive if I had a constituent need. The constituent service spot is pretty good to gather information. They hear from us, and they come up with a solution, and then we're the ones that get back to our constituents. It actually makes our job easier.
We've got about 30 seconds left, so I just want to say I oppose the idea of the plastic bag thing that you guys did. We'll talk about that off the air, because I'm going to give you 30 seconds to just wrap up what you think, where the city is going and how the city is doing. Well,
financially we're doing really well, but we do really need to put the brakes on and be careful about how much money we spend going forward. We have still a new middle school. We have to go out and get the rest of the debt for that. Our budget analyst says that we're doing pretty well. I think in terms of development, we need to put the brakes on and really think about how big we want the city of Beverly to be. I love the idea about a restaurant on the waterfront, but it really has to be scaled to that parcel. I think the gentleman who's putting it in now is trying to make it a little too big for the neighborhood. Big thing about the recommendations in here is the parking. There are a lot of things that say we don't need a lot of parking for developments, and we do, because parking's running out downtown already.
I have to interrupt you.
Go.
Okay?
Yes.
Thank you for watching. I hope you found this to be an interesting and educational discussion with the City Council President, and we'll see you next time.